Chapter 28. Return Home, End of Volume 3. You are listening at FameTV.info. The day after the successful completion of the Gimcheon Open, Han-woo-jin took his eyes off his bed. Pleasant fatigue has been passed down throughout the body to convey the feeling of dizziness. After tomorrow's rest was enough to recover. Smart. He shook his blanket halfway and heard a knock on the wooden door in his ear. Someone was knocking a closed visit. It was soon discovered who the man was. Yujin, have you got up? Yes, I just woke up. When I opened the door, there was a mother wearing a well-dressed outfit. When Han-woo-jin visited with a slightly sleepy face, she talked in a slightly worried tone. I knew how murderous the season schedule of tennis players is. It was. Is your body okay? No matter how important the competition is, if it seems to ruin you, don't you stick with it. Don't worry. I'm a professional now. Han-woo-jin laughed confidently and read her mother. So far he had not been equipped. His winning career in the Futures and Challenger Leagues and his self-confidence in his skills were improving. She erased her worried expression and laughed brightly. The growth of children is always pleasing to parents. And a serious voice flowed from the other side of those two. Honey, did Yujin wake up? Father, Han Dong-hoon was the voice. They faced each other and smiled once and walked toward the porch. The porch was not far from Han-woo-jin's room. Han Dong-hoon, who was wearing a suit neatly, didn't open the front door until two people came. It was in the morning. The cool air flowed into the room through the open door. As always, Han-woo-jin smiled a bit without knowing. What did you say? On the left wrist of the parents was a watch with a neat design. It was a gift he picked at the department store yesterday with Shin Se-yun. It wasn't very expensive, but it was a brand of its own. And I got a soul. A strict father called a few words to him because he might misunderstand his children. Even though he couldn't completely hide his happy face, he coughed at his wrist watch. As I walked toward the car, the groping of my wrist several times aroused laughs. Han-woo-jin closed the front door with a pleasant feeling. Becoming a tennis player, I felt like I had a good filial pie for the first time. He closed the door and murmured as he looked inside the house where the silence fell. What are you doing now? He was deadly when he came up with an empty day. He could be called a friend again right after he left for a competition. In addition, the former director instructed absolute stability and could not perform any basic physical training. 2 days left for the contest. I was not able to afford something. In the end, Han-woo-jin ate with the mackerel jar prepared by his mother and laid it down on the couch. When people were free, they were looking for songs or broadcasting. Han-woo-jin held the remote control in hand and adjusted the channel. News, movie, animation, game, sports. Running around in the sports channel, he stopped his finger on a program name. The program titled 2002 Wimbledon Myeongjaeonggi attracted Han-woo-jin's attention. The gaze naturally turned towards the CRT. There was a picture of two foreign players giving and taking a rally at a dreadful pace. The general public was just a ball game without thinking, but Han-woo-jin, the same player, could see. It's huge. The two players' ability was quite strong, exceeding Han-woo-jin's pride. He unknowingly looked at the names of two players competing on the court. David Nalbandian. Is there Leighton Hewitt? What is this, the finals? Somehow, he tasted. In the memory of Han-woo-jin, Leighton was ranked first and David was ranked top 3. In 2001 and 2002, it was the heyday of the two, but even now, if they were stronger than Han-woo-jin, they were not monsters. Han-woo-jin watched the game in vain and ran to the room. Back in front of the TV, his hand had a racket hanging on it. Ah, can't you? I wanted to see the status window through media such as broadcasts, but it seemed to be greedy. Han-woo-jin put his racket down next to him. However, the subtle disappointment disappeared without a trace due to the rally in the screen. One day he was staring at the TV screen with serious eyes. In 2002 Wimbledon was a battlefield for young people. At that time, Leighton was only 21 years old and David was 20 years old. In Korea, young men who would not have been in the military fought at the peak of the world called tennis. Also Leighton's won. I couldn't remember the score, but there was a skill gap between the two players. Even the difference of just a piece of paper is an insurmountable barrier in the professional world. Leighton, who took the second set, roared on the court. 6.1, 2 sets were finished with a score of 6.3. Quick. Han-woo-jin, sitting still and watching the game, turned his head, feeling the weight of the sofa leather pulling. There was only one person at home with both parents going to work. Yura. Ha. Did you say autonomous holiday? My parents ordered me to eat a meal with my brother, and a 10,001 crunched in my pocket. Han Yura watched the TV with a hazy expression that he was still asleep. She was the only exception to this family, all united in one tennis. Hanyu, who did not like tennis very much since childhood, had to feel subtle alienation whenever the family talked about tennis, Han Yura said while watching his brother focus on the TV screen. Yesterday she was sleeping because she couldn't say a proper celebration. Congratulations for your brother. Okay. Han-woo-jin replied briefly, feeling somehow unsure. I never talked to my brother on this topic. He was always stuck in a room with a cozy atmosphere. I didn't say anything, but her sympathetic gaze was stinging. Now gone, it was a story of the times they quietly watched TV for a few minutes. The living room was surrounded by the sound of the ball from the TV, the commentary, and the cheering of the crowd. The two started talking again when Leighton began to overwhelm 3 sets. Did you say there's one more competition this time? Yes, it's Seoul Open. Unlike my parents, Hanyu doesn't know much about tennis. It was natural that there was no interest. So Han-woo-jin simply gave the name of the tournament rather than explaining it in detail. She sniffed and shut her mouth for a while. Not long after, her thin lips were sweet again. Tennis, are you having fun? Well. Maybe he threw it without thinking. Han-woo-jin couldn't answer easily even though he knew it. Dedicated to tennis for over 10 years. It was fun to leave and become a part of life. Like eating, the word did not even suit. Han-woo-jin tennis was already close to breathing. Are there humans who find it fun to inhale and exhale? Of course, if you are seriously ill or have trouble with your respiratory system, you can feel the joy of smooth breathing. However, Han-woo-jin was only an ordinary person. It's funny what you think, it's a little different. You may think that it is fun to have fun while being called Hanyu. That kind of pleasure has already dulled long ago. His driving force for playing tennis was close to his inner stubbornness. I can't help it. Wouldn't this be fun? There was no talent. I was ignored. Did not go day by day, struggling but did not give up. Nevertheless, it took 10 years to decide to let go of the racket. For Han-woo-jin, tennis was, cannot be stopped, what happened for granted. I can't even quit. He wanted to call it fun. I do not know. Hanyu shrugged her shoulders with a complicated look. Even though she is premature, she is still a high school student. The view was different from Han-woo-jin, who had only tasted the bitterness of life for more than 30 years. So Woo-jin did not say more. Just watching TV. She thinks he gave me time to do it. Han Yura opened his mouth when the game was over and the cable channel was about to start broadcasting insurance ads. Brother. Ha. She hesitated for a while. There was something I wanted to say but I felt like doing something out of my mouth. Han-woo-jin waited without urging. Because I knew that if you rush in this case, it would be counterproductive. Hanyu, who was hesitant, lifted her head slightly, said in a small voice. Conference, can I go see it? Han-woo-jin forgot about it for a moment. I couldn't believe it was my brother's words that would go into the room if I just played tennis. He did not answer correctly and nodded a few times. Perhaps when my parents were at home, Yura finally made a fuss about how to know the charm of tennis. Give me the date and time later. I'll go in time. Han Yura said so, and fled to the room. In the living room, Han Wu-Jin, who had a blank face, stared at her visit closed. I could have been like this. I was happy and complex. There was a younger brother who looked at a brother who was crazy about tennis. And there was a younger brother looking forward to the brother's game. Han Wu-Jin was not even thinking about this case. You must like it very much. It was hard to come to see the game on weekdays. Considering the schedule of the Seoul Open, they were not able to afford it until Han Wu-Jin advanced to the semifinals. The two of them worried that he couldn't help them by going to the competition. How delighted you are to hear Han Yura, Han Woo-Jin, thinking about this or that situation, laughed bitterly, knowing that the weight on his back had increased by one. But not bad. You have one more reason to win. I could not look ugly in front of my brother, Han Wu-Jin, who rested at home all day yesterday, visited the convention hall in a refreshing condition. Shin Se-Yun, who drove to the parking lot, looked around the tennis court at the Olympic Park, which is wider than expected. Impressive seats made of green plastic. It's surprisingly wide. Right. There are many audience seats. I don't know how long people will come. Han Wu-Jin shed his self-talk and looked around the court. The stadium was still quite awkward as there were only a few people, including players. The sun shining down in the outdoors tickled my skin. At the same time, they tried to find a shaded seat and looked back with a familiar voice. The voice was ringing loud enough to hear from afar. Hey! Don't sit down and come here. Director Jun Sang-sik was there. The two men were bewildered and put their luggage on their seats and headed to where he was. John began to walk somewhere with his face look as usual. Director, what are you doing here? I went to the competition because it's a day off. There are some who will introduce you to him. Introduction. Who is there to meet at the tennis court? Han Wu-Jin followed him with a puzzled face. After 5 minutes of walking, I noticed a van on the corner of the parking lot and a man was getting out of the car. The height, which appears to be about 180 centimeters, was raised over the short-sleeved shirt. Surely. Han Wu-Jin stopped thinking about his name, which he had not seen yet. But without the reward he stopped. The former coach opened his mouth. Hey Form, say hello. As he got out of the car, he smiled cheerfully, covering the sun with one hand. The open forehead may not be the owner of the impression that looks cool. A word in his mouth revealed his identity. Han Woo-Jin player. He is the top player in Korean tennis, ranking first in Korea and 36th in the world. Kim Hyung-soo. Kim was in front of her eyes. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.